During the Seth Jarvis press conference, Eric Tulsky mentioned that the Hurricanes are always looking to build on the fringes of the team. Well, let's take a trip north of the border and look to the Toronto Maple Leafs. Maybe do a little offer sheet fun and cause some chaos with one Nick Robertson. So that being said, Eric Tulsky, let's cause some chaos.
You're Locked On Hurricanes, your daily podcast on the Carolina Hurricanes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to a Saturday edition of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you to the Everyday for making this your first listen of the day. Usually it's 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, but doing with some internet issues, unfortunately, this is a special Saturday episode of Locked On Hurricanes. I'm your host, Zach Martin. I'm the Carolina Hurricanes credentialed beat writer over at the Hockey Writers. Also do a Chicago Wolves column called Wolves Weekly, which will be starting here in a couple weeks. I'm also part of the Surge Cast as a co-host, along with all my duties here at Locked On Hurricanes. As I said at the top of the show, we're going to do a little bit of fun on a Saturday edition of causing chaos in terms of the hockey world, as maybe the Hurricanes could make a good move that might benefit them and also might hinder the Toronto Maple Leafs a little bit in terms of Nick Robertson, why they should offer sheet him, what could the compensation potentially be, and what does it mean for the future of the Carolina Hurricanes and the Toronto Maple Leafs if this is a move that the Hurricanes do make. But before we get into all of that, today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Now, as I said, we should definitely look into why the Hurricanes should offer sheet Nick Robertson. Now, Nick Robertson is the forward for the Toronto Maple Leafs. He's the brother of Jason Robertson of the Dallas Stars. And Nick Robertson last year for the Maple Leafs in 56 games, and that's after bouncing around between them and the Toronto Marlies of the AHL. In 56 games, he got 14 goals, 13 assists for 27 points. And in those 56 games, he only committed 4 penalties. Now, he is a restricted free agent at 22 years old. And the one thing I really like about Nick Robertson and why the Hurricanes should possibly look into getting him is that his goals for percentage is 54.50. Now, in terms of all forwards that are still available in terms of RFA status, he's only behind Cole Perfetti. And then it's in terms of the goals for percentage, if you look at guys like that. So there's a good possibility that, you're looking at Nick Robertson, who's in top 3 of restricted free agents when it comes to their goal for percentage. 54.50 is really, really good. And even his Corsi for percentage is 50.10, which is actually better than Lucas Raymond's, if you want to take that into consideration. And even his even strength time on ice per game, 10.63. Basically, he's averaging over 10.5 minutes a game. And if you look at his points per game last year for the Leafs, even in 56 games, he was a .48. So he's almost a half a point per game guy. And like I said, committing only 4 penalty minutes is really, really good if you really want to consider looking at a guy who is, what we always talk about, their best, capability or their best, ability is to be available. And that's what Nick Robertson was to the Toronto Maple Leafs. Didn't take a lot of penalty minutes, did put points up when he needed to, and that's averaging just a tad over 10.5 minutes per game last year for the Maple Leafs, and one where I think adding him could be very, very beneficial for the Carolina Hurricanes. Now, he's 22 years old. You kind of a little bit more development out of him. I know some people are going to say he's streaky. He doesn't really have a game that they're still trying to wait for him to find. He has had some injuries in the past, so he has had to deal with a certain number of injuries, shoulders, hands, and stuff like that, wrist. But this was pretty much a season where he did well, all things considered, even though that he was bouncing around between the Maple Leafs and the Marlies last season. But if you want to take a reason why looking at him as well, like I said, 22 years old, still has a lot left in the tank, had a really good season overall for the Maple Leafs, where you're looking at a guy who had, like I said, 27 points in 56 games, 14 goals. You'll take someone who's almost a half a point per game type of guy who's basically just playing under 11 minutes or around the 10.5 range. So it would make sense for the Hurricanes to take him. And for me, it's the thing where you could possibly slot him into the top 6 if you really wanted to, if you don't think guys like Jackson Blake or Bradley Nadeau are them ready to go. Now, I know people are really excited for those guys to possibly come up, but I'm not saying that they shouldn't. I'm saying, they could benefit from coming up and going internally with the team. But if you want to add another guy who has some NHL experience and, for all things considered, does have a pretty good track record, especially if you want to look at last season, I would say Nick Robertson would be the way to go. And the way that the compensation will work out, which we'll talk about in segment 2, does really make sense for the Hurricanes. And we'll go into detail what the compensation would be and how that could look for the Hurricanes. But for me, it's a move that makes sense for the Hurricanes to do, because they're talking about adding some fringe, adding some depth, and you really look at your top 6. You don't know what you're looking at. Is it possible to go internally and find a young guy who's 18, 19, maybe 20 years old, who's first year pro? Could they slide into that spot? Or, like I said, do you go externally? When, with unrestricted free agents right now, you're maybe looking at James Van Riemsdyk, who's 35, maybe Blake Wheeler, who's 38. I know Kailer Yamamoto is only 26, but he kind of struggled a lot last year with the Seattle Kraken. So there's not really a lot of UFAs left. Like I said, maybe Mike Hoffman, maybe Max Pacioretty. So it's just, you're looking at UFAs. It's kind of I don't know if any of those guys, do you want to take a flyer on a guy who's in his mid to upper 30s? Do you see him sliding into the top 6 with Kotkaniemi and Nietzsche's on your second line? And if you're not really ready to look at a young guy like a Bradley Nadeau or a Jackson Blake or a Felix Engerstrom that, first year pro, okay, you're ready to go. Let's throw you into the top 6 and see what happens. Of course, Tulsky did say that they want to go with the young guys, possibly seeing if some of the young guys can step up. So like I said, it is a possibility for that to be an option too. But I do think that if you want to go outside of the box and go after someone, because we know that Nick Robertson wants to leave Toronto. The Toronto Maple Leafs don't want to give him up, but he doesn't want to stay in Toronto because there's just the fact that they keep yo-yoing him around. They just don't play him enough. And he said he wants out. He wants traded. Now, will the Maple Leafs do it? Probably not. But we all know that, we saw what the St. Louis Blues did in Doug Armstrong. They offer sheeted 2 guys from the Edmonton Oilers in Broberg and, Holloway. So it's a possibility where it's like, okay, well, the Hurricanes already used a CBA rule in terms of deferred contracts with, Seth Jarvis and Jacob Slavin. And we know the Hurricanes aren't afraid to do an offer sheet, because that's what they did with just Barry Kotkaniemi after the Habs tried to go after Sebastian Aho. So it's not outside of the realm of possibility for the Hurricanes to use an offer sheet. And I think if you're like, okay, well, if the Maple Leafs aren't going to trade them and there's no really UFAs available that you want to go after, and Nick Robertson, last season, he only made $796,000 for the Maple Leafs. So with an offer sheet, you could easily give him an increase of money to where it benefits the player, because he's getting a pay raise, because he wants, from all reports, he wants over $1 million. But where the Maple Leafs are at, which we'll talk about in segment 2 of, they don't really have the cap space to go pull it off. Now, I know the Hurricanes really don't either, but there is some things they can work out, because we have until before opening night and stuff like that, where there's that deadline to be cap compliant. Of course, the Hurricanes have enough time to do it if they go get Nick Robertson on an offer sheet. So Maple Leafs won't trade him. There's no really unrestricted free agents left. Why not go and use an offer sheet? Like I said, they've done it before. Why not go after Robinson? He's 22 years old. Like I said, you look at his overall stats, they're really, really good from all things considered, with the fact that like I said, it was almost a half a point per game. And also, too, you look at where he was. He had only 4 penalty minutes in 56 games last year. Like, that's tied for the most, because back in 21-22, when he played 10 games for the Maple Leafs, he scored 1 goal that season. Only 4 penalty minutes. Of course, he got hurt. And then even 22-23, played in 15 games, 2 goals, 3 assists for 5 points. No penalties. So you look at to where in his career, in 6 games back in 2020, 21 to 10 to 15 to 56, he's got a total of 8 penalty minutes. And last year having 4 is really, really good. So if you really want to look at a guy who could do some Lady Bing type stuff as a forward, like we can do with Jacob Slavin on defense, Nick Robertson wouldn't be a bad option. So if you're asking me, I would definitely 100% say the Carolina Hurricanes should make an offer sheet on Nick Robinson because it could benefit them and it makes it to work out where the compensation even works out for the Carolina Hurricanes in terms of asset protection as well. So with that being said, let's talk about what the compensation could be for the Carolina Hurricanes if they do offer sheet for Nick Robertson. So stick around as we'll dive into that on a Saturday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Passion, drive, and patience. The former for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. Though the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring them huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guarantee Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Welcome back to segment 2 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. And thank you for making Locked On Hurricanes your first listen of the day. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On NHL podcast. Locked On NHL provides you a national perspective on all things NHL each and every day, with national experts and local insight on every team in the league. Available on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So like I said at the end of segment 1 of what could the compensation be for the Carolina Hurricanes and how it could benefit them if they do offer sheet Nick Robertson and how it works out for them in the long run for the player and for the team. And this is what we're looking at in terms of what the compensation could be. So in terms of what the 2023-24 season, in terms of comparison and all that stuff for what the offer sheets could look like for, and even then for, 24 for what the Hurricanes could possibly do if you look at how it works out, that with $1.51 million or less, there is no compensation. Then if you look at the third round pick, for a third round pick, it's 1.51 to 2.29. Second round is 2.29 to 4.58. And then if a first and a third, you're looking at 4.5 to 6.8. A first, a second, and a third is at 6.8 to 9.1. Two first, a second, and a third is 9.1 to $11.45 million. And then 4 first round picks are over $11.45 million. Now, here's the thing for the Carolina Hurricanes is this. The Toronto Maple Leafs are sitting at $1.275 million as of right now. Now, the Hurricanes are sitting at $79.9 thousand, but here's the thing. When you put Jesper Fast on LTIR, you do have the cap flexibility of the LTIR where the Hurricanes could have over $1 million in extra space if you offer sheet Nick Robertson. Now, with the fact of what we just talked about, what the compensations could look like if the Hurricanes make a move like this, if they have anything under one, if they have it at 1.5, which means if they do $1.5 million, or let's say 1.4, you're under the compensation of nothing. You literally could offer sheet Nick Robertson and still be within range of being in cap compliance with the LTIR flexibility when you put Jesper Fast there. So if the Hurricanes want to offer sheet Robertson for 1.4 to 1.5, they easily could do that. And the Maple Leafs would have to find ways to dump enough cap because they're at 1.2 and you have to get to 1.5. So they could try and make moves to make it work somehow. But let's just say for the sake of argument that the Maple Leafs don't make a move and Nick Robertson signs the offer sheet at 1.4 or $1.5 million, the Hurricanes could technically get Nick Robertson for nothing. And all they're doing is just paying him $1.4 to $1.5 million for the 2024-25 season. And the Maple Leafs get nothing. So that's what's the most kind of exciting part for me, if you want to look at it that way, is the fact that, yeah, if you're the Maple Leafs and you're not going to trade him and teams like Carolina might want to get him, the Hurricanes can just go around and be like, okay, we'll just offer sheet him and make it to where the threshold doesn't hit a draft pick. Because right now the Hurricanes don't have a third-round pick. So if they want to have, they have to give up an actual money or not money, we give up an actual draft pick for him, then yeah, it could really work out to where their second round pick would be $2.29 million to 4.58. So if they really wanted to, they could go to the 2.2 range and offer sheet him, and they just give up a third, or they give up a second, which he was drafted second overall in the 2019 draft. So the Maple Leafs would get something back for him. But if I'm Carolina and I know I can get him for 1.5, and if he signs and the Maple Leafs can't find a way to match that, because that's kind of the big contention right now, is they're trying to get him under $1 million or less. And he doesn't want to stay. If you offer him 1.5, and you know he's going to Carolina where he has the opportunity to get an extension with the Hurricanes because he's only 22 years old, potentially playing top 6 minutes alongside Kotkaniemi and Nichas, I think he signs that. And I think if you're the Carolina Hurricanes, you make that move for 1.5 because you're going to get that flexibility with Jesper Fast and LTIR. Boom, there you go. Nick Robertson is a Carolina Hurricane, and you're giving up absolutely nothing for him. That could be really, really huge for the Hurricanes. So like I said, you're looking at a possibility of there's no unrestricted free agents available. You may be looking at Van Riemsdyk, maybe Mike Hoffman, maybe Yamamoto, Blake Wheeler, maybe. So you're not really looking at a lot of options in terms of other restricted free agents. It'd be kind of hard to go for a Lucas Raymond or a Maurice Sider or one of those top echelon guys, or a Thomas Harley from Dallas. Nick Robertson wouldn't be a bad option as well. He's got really good wheels, so he could really fit into the Hurricane system of transition and using the speed. And he could match a Martin Nichas, honestly, in terms of speed. And he's young, so you can form into how you want him to be. And like I said, he's had 4 penalty minutes last season. He's had 8 penalty minutes total in his entire career. Of course, I know it's not a lot of games. It's not a huge sample size. But 56 games last year and only 4 penalty minutes is pretty good. And for the fact that he's got 8 total in his career, and even the season before, he only played 15 games. He played 15 games, but he still had no penalty minutes. So you're taking a guy who's got some Lady Byng potential on the forward side, where he's going to be available to wherever you want to use him in all situations you possibly could. Like I said, he was a 0.48 points per game, 14 goals, 27 points. In just the tower in 56 games. That's pretty good. That's really good. You'll take that. And on top of just looking at it, like I said, Nick Robertson overall, you can't beat a goals for percentage of 54.50. That's really, really good. The fact that he's always on the ice when they're scoring goals, and most of the time his Corsi 4, where it's talking about percentage of possession, where you want to be over 50% because that means you have the puck more when you're on the ice. He does. He's at 50.10, and that's better than Lucas Raymond of the Detroit Red Wings. And he's doing all of this with just a tad over 10.5 minutes per game of even strength time on ice. So if you give him the opportunity to make a case to be in the top 6, where you're looking at 12, no, I wouldn't even say like 15, 16, 17 minutes a game, and you're going to be with Kotkaniemi and Nichas, and you possibly have a chance to go play on some special teams if need be, and you're making $1.5 million after making under $800,000 last year, and you're going to be in Carolina where you know that they always seem to do really well in the playoffs, all things considered, and you're with Rod Brind'Amour as your head coach. Not a bad option, all things considered, if you're Nick Robertson and you're looking for a change of scenery, and you're going to do it in a place where you'll match up quite well with the guy on your opposite side of Martin Nichas, and you're going to be, like I said, with Rod Brind'Amour, and you're getting paid a good chunk of a difference higher at 1.5 instead of just tad under $800,000. And you have the possibility of also extending in Carolina too. So, like I said, compensation-wise, if the Hurricanes really don't have to give up a draft pick, they could sign him to $1.5 million because they have the flexibility with the LTIR projected cap space. I don't see where the negative is. Yeah, like I said, injuries is a thing that he's had in the past, but who knows? Maybe it's one of those things where it works out where he's healthy, he doesn't miss any games, and you slime into your top 6 to go opposite of Martin Nichas, and you got speed on either side with Kotkaniemi in the middle. Svechnikov, Aho, Jarvis, Robertson, Kotkaniemi, Nichas. That's not really a bad top 6, all things considered, where you don't want to go older with guys like Van Riemsdyk or Hoffman. And maybe you give those guys that are like Blake and Nadeau and all them more time to get ready in the pros in Chicago with Cam Abbott, which is not a bad option either. So you're looking at a 22-year-old left winger who rarely takes penalty minutes, who's got speed and who has the capability of scoring goals. I'm just saying it makes sense. And in that case, what does that mean for the future for the Hurricanes and the Maple Leafs? Well, if you stick around, we'll talk about that here in a second on a Saturday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. All right, guys, we got to talk about Gametime. And Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. The one good thing I like about the fact is that you get amazing deals and the all-in pricing. That is a very great option to have. And even too, your seat viewfinder is also a great thing that I really love about the app. With Gametime Picks, your creation makes it easier to save more on sports, along with concerts, comedies, theater, and so much more. So it's very, very versatile. And like I talked about the all-in pricing, if you toggle this feature, which you must do to make sure that you get that all-in pricing, you have to turn on this feature. If you toggle it, it shows the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. So that means whatever seat you pick, you know what you're paying for up front before you even get to the checkout portion of the screen. And with their seat views, you get a panoramic view seat finder in the app. So before you buy the tickets, you know exactly what you're looking at the event. So no obstructive views, no weird angles. You know what you're looking at before you even get there. So essentially, you're taking the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. So in that being said, download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL. That's LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. Welcome back to segment 3 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. So like I said at the end of segment 2, what does that mean for the future of the Carolina Hurricanes and the Toronto Maple Leafs if the Hurricanes do make an offer sheet for Nick Robertson that benefits them to $1.4, $1.5 million and potentially the Maple Leafs can't match that? Well, if you really want to look at it this way in terms of what the team would look like, the Carolina Hurricanes would give up no compensation to have them because they would fit under the $1.51 million threshold of not having to give up a draft pick. And their projected cap space would technically be 1.3 million over if it's at 1.4, but if it's 1.5, then you're talking under $1 million. But that's the projected cap space. When you look at the projected cap space with potential LTIR movement, at 1.4, it's $1.079 million, or it'd be under $100 million. It'll be under $1 million, so around the 800,000 plus range, to where you would still technically have cap because of the LTIR structuring. So the Hurricanes would be cap compliant with the LTIR movement, just because of the fact that if you think of like the Vegas Golden Knights, Tampa Bay Lightning, stuff like that, and you would have a full roster. And like I said, you wouldn't have to worry about, having to give up compensation. And you have a full 23-man roster. So you're looking at a Svechnikov, Aho, Jarvis first line, Nick Robertson, Kotkaniemi, Martin Necas as your second line, Martinook, Jordan Stahl, Jack Roslovic, and of course, William Carey, Jack Drury, and Eric Robinson. So Robertson being on that second line left wing, it would be for a year, but of course you can easily, extend him after that, depending on how the season goes, which, even at $1.4, $1.5 million, it's still a really good deal for a guy who's 22 years old and who could really benefit from a change of scenery and could fit really well with the Carolina Hurricanes. And in that, it's a move that makes sense in terms of money wise, where you're not paying him a whole lot, and you got a lot of contracts coming off the books next year. You got Brent Burns, Dmitry Orlov. That's well over, $13 million right there, like $12.9, $13 million with those two guys. So there's a good possibility that you have a lot more money that's going to open up for a Nick Robertson to get extended for the Hurricanes. And even Frederick Anderson 3.4 comes off the Bucks too. So you can still be in a good situation where, with those contracts coming off the books, you could extend Nick Robertson to a 5 to 8 year contract, depending on how he does for you. And it's like, that's locking him up until he's what? Like if it's 5 years, you're talking 27, 8 years will put him at around 30, maybe 31, depending on when he was born and stuff like that. I think he was born and it was September 11th, 2001. And you're looking at, like I said, 8 years. You're looking at possibly 30 years old, maybe 31 at the most. So that's not a bad extension if you're going to look at it that way with terms of that. So he's going to be 23 when the season starts. So you give him 8 year deal, he'll be 31 if you give him 8 years, if he does really well this upcoming season as a 1 year offer sheet. You give him 8 years. Even if you give him 5, you're still putting him at 28. So that's what the future kind of looks like if you're the Carolina Hurricanes, that you offer sheet Robertson. The Leafs can't keep him. You don't have to give up you don't have to give up a pick for him. And if he plays really well in a system that could probably benefit him, and being on a line with a speedster like Martin Necas, and being with a guy who can throw their body around like KK, who's a lot of people are saying could be that Jordan Staal 2.0 defensive forward, that could be a really great season for a guy who's probably looking to have his first full season in the NHL and not bouncing around from the NHL to the American Hockey League. And I think that'd be a great opportunity for him. I think it'd be a great opportunity for the Hurricanes to go find someone that isn't older in age like a Van Riemsdyk or a Hoffman, but you don't have to kind of worry about a youngster right away who's 18, 19, 20 years old. You have a guy who's 22 who does have some NHL experience and has scored goals, has put up points in a small sample size, but it's enough to where it's like, okay, this could be something that we can look at in terms of putting an offer sheet out. And yes, 1.5 doesn't sound like a lot, but if in terms of the Toronto Maple Leafs, do you have 1.5 million to spare when you're looking at 1.24 as your possible space that's left? Because right now the Maple Leafs are 1.275. And like I said, if you're the Hurricanes, you're at $79,000. But like I said, with cap movement, you can make it work to where the LTIR could give you enough flexibility. I'm just saying it's a really great possibility if you're the Carolina Hurricanes, where you're looking at a Nick Robertson, to where it's a great option of $1.5 million at the most, to where it's something that could really, really work out for the Hurricanes. So that's just what I'm thinking in terms of how that's going to work out. But I don't know. Let me know what you think. Do you think the Hurricanes should make the move for Nick Robertson? And do you think that, would it possibly work at $1.5, $1.4 million to where you don't have to give up a pick? And if you have to, it'd be kind of tough to go to the $2.29 million range, just because I don't think the Hurricanes really have that much flexibility on that. So, and they don't really have their third round pick. So basically it would have to be 1.5 at the most that could work out. And I don't know. I just don't think the Maple Leafs can pull it off. And I think the Hurricanes have a good legitimate shot of getting a guy basically for free. All you're doing is paying him $1.5 million for a season, and you could extend him to 5 or 8 years after that. And you got him locked up with the rest of the really young core that is Svechnikov, Aho, Jarvis, Kotkaniemi. You got the youngsters coming up too, and Jackson Blake and Briley Nadeau and Felix Unger-Storm. So yeah, let me know in the comments what you think. Do you think the Hurricanes should offer sheet Nick Robertson, and do you think it should be 1.4 or $1.5 million? But I think that will wrap up the Saturday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. I know I'm sorry that there was no episode on Friday, dealing with a lot of internet issues and tech stuff, but was trying to get an episode out for you guys today. I think this is a one that could really cause some really good chaos on a Saturday, where you're possibly thinking, maybe the Hurricanes should offer sheet Nick Robertson. But if you want to keep up with anything that I'm doing over at the Hockey Writers and on the podcast, you can follow me at OneTrueZach on X. The podcast is @LN_Hurricanes. If you click the link tree in my bio, you can find all of my articles at the Hockey Writers, and you can watch and listen to my other podcasts, the Surgecast. And for this show, you can check out where to listen on all podcast platforms. If you leave a 5-star rating and review, I might just read on the show. And if you're on the YouTube side of things, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification so you don't miss a show. Hit the thumbs up button. Let me know if you liked the episode. Like I said, in the comments section, do you think the Hurricanes should offer sheet Nick Robertson, and should it be to the 1.4 or $1.5 million range. Make sure to share this with all other Caniacs so they become everydayers just like you. We are over 950 subscribers. We are very, very close to getting 1,000 subscribers. And if we get to 1,000 subscribers, I might just do something special for you guys. But I hope everyone enjoyed the Saturday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Hope everyone has a great Saturday and their weekend. And until next time, as always, let's go Canes.